Well, after all of the hubbub about what was happening in July, we were going to get big news on Florida State and Clemson. We were going to find out something big, right? It started really with the Josh Pate gif of the water shaking on the table. And obviously, I think most people figured we'd be getting some sort of news by August 15th. And here we are, August 15th. We made it through all of July. The July 26th date was thrown out for a minute. We get through the entire month. We get to August, and the August 15th date was so important because that is the deadline if you want to tell the ACC that you are going to withdraw by the next school year. So the 2025-26 school year. This was the date. This was the deadline. And as of 8:24 Central Time, I guess it would be 9:24 Eastern Time, we have not seen anything from Florida State or Clemson. It is consistent with the reporting that we had leading up to this. Obviously, if you paid attention to like Pete Thamel, the report that he had back in late July, there were others. I know Brett McMurphy, I think, kind of bristled at that and said, hey, I was actually first on the scene with this. There was plenty of reporting that suggested we would get here and this would come to pass without much happening. We are here. Nothing has happened, and it does look like for the foreseeable future here, we're just kind of stuck in neutral. And speaking of Brett McMurphy, I was listening to him talk quite a bit the other day on a really good radio interview that he did about the fact that everything in conference realignment basically is just stuck right now in neutral, waiting on what is going to happen with Florida State and Clemson. So no movement. And look, I can already see people reacting a bit to the title. I'm just saying not anytime soon, as in it does not look like it is going to happen before next year. Now, is it completely set in stone on that? I suppose it is not, if you really truly do believe that Florida State is going to have a major legal breakthrough here that will bust open the entire conference, which namely would be whether it's going to be a settlement or some kind of ruling, just a cost that is not going to be prohibitive for other teams to leave the league, then I suppose it still could happen at some time, maybe relatively soon. But guys, I don't see it right now. Now that does not mean, and I know Greg Flugar has done a great job of addressing this today, that does not mean that this is some massive L that Florida State and Clemson are taking today. There were comments made last August by some in the Florida State sphere, Board of Regents types. I'm forgetting who specifically it was. I have it in my notes somewhere. But laid out like, hey, we want to have an exit plan by next August. We want to have an exit plan within a year. So I guess from that standpoint, if you want to classify it as some sort of L for Florida State, you can. I don't really think that it is because the whole idea now at this point is they need to blow the entire conference up based on what the landscape is, which is the Brett McMurphy reporting that indicates if they were to leave right now, if it doesn't blow the entire ACC up, they're probably not going to have a Big Ten or an SEC home because the Big Ten and SEC are going to be much more interested in North Carolina. So if the entire conference blows up and they're going to say, hey, all right, we'll start doing the realignment thing again. We'll expand. We'll grab some teams. It's going to start with North Carolina, perhaps Virginia as well. Then maybe work your way down to Florida State and Clemson as some partners to come with some folks. That's kind of the way I would expect that to go. If that doesn't happen and those schools are still in the ACC, it's too cost prohibitive to get out. That's the problematic scenario that has been laid out by Brett McMurphy. So that's kind of where I see it, guys. I'll talk more in depth about it. I have more notes on it, obviously. That will be the lead story today. Figured I had to get you guys some kind of a show here today with it being August 15th. The realignment heads know all about this date. And I'm sure Greg did a fantastic in-depth show on this earlier today as well. But I'll give you my take, my opinion on this and where things sit right now. I am, as you can see, I'm not with the normal setup. A little bit of a road show here today. All right, we're on the road. But I'm still going to get a show in for you guys. We have not talked about the AP rankings that came out earlier this week, which largely are pretty uneventful for the Big 12. It's very, very similar to the coaches poll. I think the only people that might have gripes here, I don't know, UCF, Texas Tech fans going to say, hey, what gives? We got votes in the other poll we didn't hear. But I do have a take for you on which unranked team in the Big 12 I think has the best chance to be ranked by the end of the season. And it coincides with just an absolutely wild take. I say take. It's not even really a take, a prediction of sorts from Andy Staples at On 3, but it is based on data. So he and Ralph Russo, he used a story from Ralph Russo of the Associated Press to peruse through some data about how to pick the teams that will be in the college football playoff. And that ended up with two schools from the Big 12, okay? Two schools from the Big 12, but they are not two that anybody is really talking about right now to be college football playoff contenders. So because there is some data to back it up, it is not just a random prediction. I do want to tie both of those things together for you. And I also would like to react to some of your Big 12 hot takes today, because I put the word out. I put the bat signal out for some Big 12 hot takes fairly recently on Twitter, and we definitely got some hot takes, man. There were some pretty scorching takes out there at points. So I want to react to some of that all on the show here today. Thank you all for joining me. Those of you who are here on YouTube, those of you who are here via Twitter/X, I appreciate you as well. Leave the comments in the comment section. Keep those coming. I am seeing one actually coming from Black Cats here that listed as coming from X. Typically, I think, like, hey, hop in. If you're on X, if you're on Twitter, you want to be a part of the show, be able to comment, be able to have your comment read, hop into that YouTube link, just John Kurtz on YouTube, to get in there and get your voice heard here. You can obviously leave regular comments. Don't have time to get to a lot of those. If you want to make sure that you get on the show tonight, you click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. And that will create a super chat, which ensures that I read it on the show here tonight. Much appreciate everybody who is able to do that. If you are not, there are still plenty of ways to support me. Definitely like the video. That always helps. But the big thing right now, especially if you are a Big 12 fan, I've got the Big 12 newsletter open for business that you can sign up for right now. ofbnews.com. Working on getting one sent out to you tomorrow. So if you sign up tonight, you should have one in your inbox very, very soon, within the next 24 hours. ofbnews.com to get signed up for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Best Big 12 headlines that you want, me reacting to your hot takes. We have the anonymous player survey that came out recently. So make sure you get signed up if you are a Big 12 fan. And if you're enjoying it, please spread the word. Let's see. What else do we have? John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo is another way that you can contribute to the channel if you're not catching this live. And if you are not, and you leave your question or comment with the donation there, I will kick off the next show with your question or comment. So there are plenty of ways to get involved, even if you are not watching this live. Now, Ken, I do see Ken here. He left me a donation via Venmo, and I appreciate that, Ken. Now, Ken also said, I'm just now seeing this, Ken. I didn't see the back half of this where you told me to email you to get the full story, to ask to get more in depth on your suggestion here. But I do know the very basics of what you're talking about here. Ken is a K-State fan who said K-State football integrated the conference 75 years ago. Should they honor that with a patch or an alternate uniform? I think it'd be cool. I mean, the alternate uniform thing, I just don't. This is not my opinion. It is my guess on what would happen. I doubt that you're going to see any of that because Chris Kleiman became very superstitious about the alternate uniform thing when they kept losing in them his first year. That basic and well, it extended into the Tulane game in 2022. You can really blame Tulane and Willie Fritz, Houston fans. You can blame that for the fact that K-State's not really busting out any of the alternates anymore. So I don't think you will likely see that. And you know what? If Chris Kleiman keeps winning, like whatever, that's fine. I was at one point in time very big on getting the alternates in there. I would love to see K-State don the all whites again. I love those, but if they're going to keep winning and be superstitious about it, then that is fine. A patch, though, I think that's a much more realistic possibility, and I think that would be great. I think a patch would be awesome. I would love it if they did that, and maybe something is already in the works. Maybe they're thinking about that. Probably worth reaching out to somebody at K-State on that front. But I will email you when I get done, Ken, and try and get some more background there on that story. But I appreciate you reaching out. And appreciate you bringing that to my attention because I did not realize that it was going to be the 75th anniversary season of that coming up here. So anyway, appreciate that. Again, if you guys want to be a part of the show tonight, leave a comment, a super chat by clicking the $ below the chat box. Okay, so Florida State and Clemson hit the deadline today of August 15th. They did not leave by that deadline to notify the ACC of your intention to leave next year. So theoretically, what that means is they are stuck for the 2025-2026 season. Again, I say theoretically because if something big were to happen, and the entire conference imploded, then obviously that would be off the table. Like if the conference ceases to exist because enough teams are leaving and it goes totally George Kliavkoff Pac-12, that would be a different story. There is also this. I was going to read you this from Brian Murphy, who covers the ACC for WRAL. He tweeted out this earlier today. ACC Constitution calls for, quote, a member to file an official notice of withdrawal on or before August 15th for the withdrawal to be effective June 30th the following year. In Florida State's original complaint, it says it has been discharged and excused from any duties, including all duties concerning notice of withdrawal. Further, it asked that Florida State be deemed to have issued its formal notice of withdrawal effective of August 14, 2023. So you remember there was a debate about that at the time that it happened. I guess he is pointing out that in some ways, Florida State has already kind of claimed here that they are not bound under all of these duties. So perhaps Florida State views it like that. I think Greg Flugar really had it nailed more, where it's like they're going for the home run here. So if you were to issue your withdrawal and be in line with what was once said last August, and it was Florida State trustee Justin Roth who said last August he wanted the Seminoles to have an exit plan ready to execute within 12 months, which obviously would be right now. If they were trying to make themselves be totally beholden to that and continuing with being very brash, they could theoretically come out and say, well, here today, this is our notice of withdrawal. Take it. We're going to be out of the conference one way or another by June 30th of next year, and then just try and work your way backwards from that. Like, I guess they could do that, but it seems, at least to me, doubtful, like everything would be legally wrapped up right now. All the ACC's posturing has been very much so that, like, we're not giving into this. We're not going to give them what they want and settle right now. Who knows what happens when push comes to shove, but that seems to be the current climate of it all. So it doesn't seem likely that they would get something figured out where the big time scenario plays out. So you kind of have to just wait it out. If you believe the Brett McMurphy reporting, and certainly I know that Greg, who is very well connected, is in line with this as well. If you are buying what they are saying, like, hey, it would be a real problem if it's just Florida State and Clemson as far as them trying to get into one of the two conferences they want to get into, they've got to sit back and wait for another one, you know? I mean, that'd be like a pitch on the outside corner. You could swing at it and try and punch it into right field. That could be a base hit, but you want to wait for something a little bit more in the sweet spot. You want to wait for something a little bit more over the heart of the plate that you could drive out of here. I think that's really the analogy for where a Florida State or a Clemson fan would be right now. Do we have some interesting things happening in the chat here? I'm seeing. Okay. We had a little fighting about Clemson and Georgia there. Anyway, interesting. So yeah, some reporting here. I will read to you a little bit from Matt Baker. He had a story recently, just kind of summing up like where things are at right now between the conference and Florida State and Clemson. We still have four suits going on right now. 4 lawsuits, dueling lawsuits. The fifth ended because that was about the getting the contract out there, the ACC ESPN contract out there. But Matt Baker's reporting said months before Florida State and the ACC sued each other, FSU trustee Justin Roth wanted the Seminoles to have an exit plan ready to execute within 12 months. That was last August. As far as where things are at right now, each case has cleared the first procedural jurisdictional hurdle and is proceeding in that side's home court. or to use a tennis analogy, every party has held serve. Every party has held serve. FSU has appealed its North Carolina loss to the state Supreme Court. Clemson has said it will do the same. The ACC has suggested those cases could be combined. The league has also appealed its initial defeat in Leon County, which is Florida. That's Tallahassee there. And now we wait, I suppose, until the ESPN deadline. That's the next place that Matt Baker kind of moves with this reporting, is that the next big date that's coming up is February of 2025, which we know is when ESPN would have to make a decision as to whether or not to extend the TV deal with the ACC beyond 2027. So that's another detail at play here. Florida State and Clemson may not want to make any kind of hasty move here now and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and give the notice of withdrawal right now, if they're still waiting on ESPN to make a decision and they think there's a real possibility that ESPN might say, well, nah, we don't want to extend this TV deal beyond 2027. As I'm thinking through it, maybe you come back and say, well, if you give your notice of withdrawal right now and ESPN's going to be thinking, well, those schools won't be there, then they would possibly terminate the contract. Then I don't know. There are a lot of moving parts here. I again will reference Brett McMurphy, who I listened to lay basically all this out and be like, look, there's still just so much going on that we don't know how exactly all the chips are going to fall right now. But February 2025 will be the next one. If you ask Jim Phillips, obviously at ACC Media Days, I mean, he seemed quite confident about their relationship with ESPN being in great shape and all is well, nothing to see here. It's going to be fine. I would tend to think that it's probably going to be a little murkier than he is making it out to be there. But I'm not taking Jim Phillips at face value. You guys know how I feel about him. Not the biggest fan. And of course, he's got a very, very vested interest in saying that right now. Just, hey, everything's going to be fine. Nothing at all to see here with the ESPN aspect of this. I will be very intrigued by that. But right now, we're kind of on a timeline where I'm in I'll believe it when I see it mode on something major happening, because we've been teased. We've been teased. We have been very teased by this. The month of July was one massive tease, and that's not a reference to some of the Big 12 smoke that started to pop up with Florida State and Clemson. That's a reference to, the Josh Pate storyline that was out there, and then just the swell of rumors that really followed. And there was a lot of confidence from the Florida State side of things, for sure. Clemson too, but Florida State just is seemingly a little bit more brash, a little bit more out there. I see them anyway more. They are more visible to me throughout all of this. And there was just so much going on there. I thought, well, damn, I guess this is going to happen. We talk about the similarities between what's going on with the ACC right now and what happened last year with the Pac-12 and the whole Big 12 v Pac-12 mirroring in some ways, the Big 12 v ACC right now. One of the differences is we had a little bit more of an immediate deadline with the Pac-12 stuff, where you knew, okay, they really have to. I mean, there is a solid deadline here where they're going to have a TV deal. Like they've got one for this season. They need one for next season, and they're running out of time here. And it became more and more clear that a school like Colorado was like really going to need an answer very, very quickly. There was more of a sense of urgency there because of the nature of this lawsuit, a little bit more long and drawn out. And I do think there's an element here of like everybody thinks that they really know about this. And yet, because not only is it realignment related, but it's also, there's a legal element here, which is kind of, I'll be honest, it's certainly out of my wheelhouse. And I would say it's probably out of most college football fans' wheelhouses. There is an element of that making this a bit more unpredictable. So this one may be more long and drawn out. So I guess what I'm saying, Big 12 fans may need to settle in and get to know your ACC brother and sister a little bit better, because this may be a longer duel between the two sides. We'll see. But today, point being, significant deadline that we had all been pointing to for a while. It's come and gone. Smoke seems to have cleared out quite a bit on all the something big happening between the ACC and Florida State and Clemson for right now. I guess if you want to say, hey, Josh Pate really did come back around and say, hey, I thought a big part of this is that the Big 12 is a potentially likely landing spot for Florida State and Clemson. He still could be right about, hey, something big happened and shook it up. And that, he may have been hearing the stuff about Big Ten and SEC not being as interested in that. So maybe I shouldn't paint it as, hey, we got totally duped. But the main narrative seemed to be people thought something was definitely going to happen before we actually got to the month of August. And now here we are with the big August 15th date that's been out there forever with nothing actually happening. Okay, let's hop into a super chat here from Alan. I love what I'm seeing with this one so far, and it'll be a nice transition into a little bit of Big 12 talk on the show here. Appreciate you, Alan. Thank you for being here. Alan says, John, did you see the Lance Leipold interview with Paul Feinbaum? Kind of like your girlfriend, kind of like watching your girlfriend getting hit on by a drunken Mizzou fan. Oh, boy. Can't wait for the Big 12 season to start. Rock, Jock, Jayhawk, Alan. I appreciate you, Alan. I did not see that. I did not know that Lance Leipold went on Paul Feinbaum. First of all, that's a pretty big win for the league to get a head coach on the Paul Feinbaum show. Because remember, was it 2 years ago, or would it have even been 2021 when Iowa State had it was probably 21 when Iowa State had the disappointing season after bringing everybody back from 2020, getting to the Big 12 championship game, winning the Fiesta Bowl in the weird COVID season. They brought all those guys back. All those guys who were tearing it up in the NFL, by the way. Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, the two tight ends that were really good. Big 12 defensive player of the year. Like, it was a loaded team, and they went 7-6. At that point, I remember Paul Feinbaum saying, just declaring, I'm not talking about Iowa State anymore. I'm done with that. Get them out of here. He was sick of the Iowa State hype there. So now you have another Big 12 team in similar vein-ish. Although, look, I mean, Kansas won 9 games with Lance Leipold already. That has not happened a whole lot in Iowa State history. But a team from a similar tier in the Big 12, and now Paul Feinbaum seems to be okay, at least with interviewing a coach. So that's good progress for the Big 12 with Paul Feinbaum, if you care at all. The other thing I always remember about Feinbaum is that he was, what did he say about Bill Snyder? I'm going to need my K-State folks to help me out here. But he had said it wasn't completely disparaging about Bill Snyder, but he kind of wrote him off a little bit. And then it took, God bless John Fabris, man. Former K-State assistant twice under Bill Snyder, Snyder 1.0, Snyder 2.0. He actually called in to the Feinbaum show, and he is a guy from the South, grew up in SEC country, had that as his background, coached in SEC country, had that as his background, and he gives Paul the business, basically, and just detailing the story of how amazing the Bill Snyder turnaround was, and actually got Paul to back off. So few and far between, I guess, is the point here, Alan, when the Big 12 has had nice moments on the Feinbaum show. So I would actually be interested to go listen to that. As for your analogy, that is funny. A part of this is a little bit of an inside joke here for Alan. If you guys have watched the show for a long time, you know that Alan does not at all like the idea of Kansas to the SEC, which seems like most Kansas fans probably are in favor of that. But Allen is not. He is very much not. So seeing his head coach on with Paul Feinbaum, it does have to, I can see where that gets some wires twisted there, Allen. But I would say embrace it because it means your team's being talked about, man. I mean, we're here just a couple weeks away from the season. Everybody's ramping into season mode, getting ready to talk about that. And here's Paul Feinbaum, voice of the SEC, talking to the head football coach at the University of Kansas, man. I mean, that's not a bad thing. I understand some of the trauma that's there, Alan, but it's not a bad thing. All right. So thank you for alerting me to that. I legit will try to go listen to that. So anyway, appreciate you, Alan. Thank you, sir. If you guys want to be a part of the show, click the $ below the chat box in order to do so. If you want to be like Alan and make sure you make it on there. Boy, not a lot of love for Paul Feinbaum around here. I mean, I'm not a huge particular Paul Feinbaum fan. You guys have heard all my Feinbaum takes. It's like, yeah, the SEC stuff, It's whatever. It's annoying. Feinbaum's built a name for himself. I understand. Like, you build a name for yourself, it will carry you. You don't necessarily. As a former radio host, right? I hosted radio for 10 years. The thing that drives me nuts about Feinbaum is, one, callers are typically not entertaining. He has a more entertaining crop of callers than most shows. I will give him that. That's why I never liked taking callers. They're not entertaining, and it's kind of lazy radio. Like, you don't have to prep as much. You just let a caller come on, say some crazy stuff, and react to it. It's not, as a radio nerd, that's just an easy way to do it. So that's always bothered me a little bit. But look, I respect the guy, and he built up his whole character and image over years and years in the SEC. But that's what you'll get out of me, is that Paul Feinbaum does a lazy form of radio where, the callers really take over and do most of the heavy lifting and the work. Not only that, but then it's just like all interview based. Sometimes I'm like, people get mad at Paul Feinbaum's takes, but if you listen throughout the course of like a 4-hour show, there aren't that many takes in there. It's a lot of guests and it's a lot of callers, and there's not much in terms of like developing a real topic or take. Anyway, who am I? I'm just a guy sitting on YouTube doing a show to all 656 people that are here. So Paul Feinbaum's, he's got that over me, man. He's definitely got that over me. Okay, Big 12 in the AP poll. Big 12 in the AP poll. Here's what we've got. I will show you Big 12 teams in the AP poll. It is the same teams, the same group of teams that made it into the coaches poll. There we go. And they're all within 1 or 2 spots of where they were in the coaches poll. So there's really nothing, I think, to get too worked up over, too upset over. I mean, Utah at 12, it's a lot of respect for the Utes, especially with Cam Rising coming back off that injury. Oklahoma State, K-State back-to-back, 17-18. Arizona, Kansas, 21-22. If you really wanted to squabble over the order of that, we could do it, but you have 4 teams there between 17 and 22. I think you could mix and match and feel fine about any of that. The top 9 are all from either the Big Ten, the SEC, or Notre Dame being an independent. So I would point that out, for all the talk about the ACC. And I had an ACC fan, even in my hot takes thread the other day, saying, oh, my hot take is that you'll sit here and push a narrative that the Big 12 is better than the ACC. Well, it's not a hot take, by the way. That's just a fact, my friend. You already heard the take on the vibes, #vibes, being in favor of the Big 12. But even beyond the vibes, I mean, the ACC's got, with Clemson and Florida State, the 2 that are going to be departing at some point, they're 10-14. Utah and Oklahoma State are 12-17. Like, it's not that far off. You got 5 Big 12 teams ranked. It's more than what the ACC has. I mean, I know this is far from the be-all, end-all. I'm just saying it is a data point that's like, they're really that different, even in the one big thing that ACC fans are really pointing to right now. So there you have it. The hot take already coming to fruition. Yes, I am continuing to push that narrative here. I don't think there's really much reason to be aggrieved if you're a Big 12 fan. Colorado did get some votes in both polls. I'm sure, especially in light of the Deion press conference, the Coach Prime press conference that we just had recently, people are even a little bit more fired up about that now than maybe they are at some points. UCF and Texas Tech got some votes in the coaches poll. They did not in the AP poll. So I did want to ask this question. And actually, I need to go check the results of my Twitter poll on this, because I put out a Twitter poll about this earlier today before I hopped on to do the show. Where is the Twitter poll? All right, we got 786 votes on this thing. And I asked you, which unranked Big 12 team is most likely to be ranked by the end of the season, and why? So I will share my screen and just show you guys the results here of this. This is what you have said after 786 votes. I gave you the choices of Iowa State and West Virginia, which were receiving votes in both polls. UCF receiving votes in one of the 2. That was really a personal choice by me to include them over TCU, Texas Tech, and Colorado. And that may give you a little bit of insight into where I'm going with this. But right now, UCF is winning. 38% of the 786 that have voted think UCF is the best bet to be ranked at the end of the season. That's not right now out of that group in the Big 12. Iowa State, 26%. Surprisingly, West Virginia at 22%. I thought West Virginia might wind up winning that. And if we're going based on just like, well, maybe that's not even fair. I was going to say, like, based on proven contributors and production from last year, West Virginia's got an awful lot of it. UCF does, and Iowa State definitely does. So maybe I was wrong for just assuming West Virginia there. West Virginia, as if you read Open for Business, and by the way, Open for Business, Big 12 newsletter, you can sign up at ofbnews.com or click the link in the description of this video to get Big 12 news and headlines and my analysis and insight straight to your inbox twice a week. College football news without SEC or Big 10 bias. Sounds nice, right? There was a lot of takes all over the board on West Virginia. I had some people telling me West Virginia is going to win the Big 12. I had some people telling me West Virginia is going to miss a bowl game. And I think a lot of people get really wrapped up in the schedule, but it is tricky, man. It's a tricky schedule this year for West Virginia, especially when you're starting out with the non-conference schedule that West Virginia has. My question was, which unranked team will be ranked by the end of the year, right? I think the team most likely to be in that category, and I'm sure, no matter what I was going to say, this will rub some people the wrong way. I lean UCF. I go UCF. I really like the skill talent. I really like KJ Jefferson. I think Gus Malzahn is a very good coach, and I think you pair him with a quarterback like KJ Jefferson. If he stays healthy, same caveat I could use for basically every quarterback in the conference here and any team that we talk about in the conference. If he stays healthy, I think that's a really dangerous team that could be a 9-game winner and flirt with the Big 12 championship game. I don't see them getting there, but I think UCF has that kind of upside if things go well. And as I compare them to every team, right? Because I think your battle here, the discussion you're having here is UCF, Texas Tech, TCU, Colorado, West Virginia. Those are the teams I would have in this conversation. I don't know that. Who else you can throw out there at me? Baylor, BYU. I don't think they're quite ready for that. Look, DeQuan Finn, maybe he's great. Maybe he's fabulous and plays Baylor into this discussion a little bit. But I think this is the tier that you're talking about here. So Texas Tech, man, I felt very vindicated when I flipped on the Solid Verbal today, one of my favorite college football podcasts. I actually hadn't listened to them in a while. And I was listening to their Big 12 preview, and Dan, shout out to Dan Rubenstein. Dan said, with Texas Tech, he's like, I can't get there with Baron Morton. I don't know. It feels like a limited ceiling with Baron Morton at quarterback. And I was like, dude, my man, that's been my Texas Tech take. There's a lot to like there. They're certainly recruiting well. There is some talent, but I think you got to have more upside in your quarterback than Baron Morton for me to really believe in you threatening to be in the Big 12 championship game. So I understand he's battled injuries. I understand Tech as a whole has had wretched quarterback injury luck. I just still haven't seen the upside out of Baron Morton that I would really want to see there. As we're comparing him to like a KJ Jefferson, a Shedeur Sanders, a Garrett Green, I do not think he has the upside of those guys. So more upside, weaker schedule than Texas Tech, if we're talking about UCF here, because UCF does get a nice little kiss in that. Where did I have that at? UCF misses. I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to have to go look at their schedule. They miss a couple of the top teams there, which is a part of why I like where they're at. They have a more manageable schedule than West Virginia for sure. So I'm holding them up against West Virginia. A lot of that does come down to just the schedule. Look, West Virginia, man, they have a tough non-con, and I've told you I will probably pick them to beat Penn State. But they do have Penn State, they have at Pitt, and then this 5-game stretch early in Big 12 play. They go Kansas, at Oklahoma State, Iowa State, K-State, at Arizona in a 5-game stretch. And it does not get much tougher than that in the Big 12. I understand Utah is not on that list. That's still pretty damn tough. So that'll make a big difference for West Virginia there. I'll take the UCF schedule over that. I like both of those quarterbacks a lot. I think they both have pretty high ceilings. But I think, I'll just be honest, I think much more of Gus Malzahn as a head coach than Neil Brown. the one season last year at the Power 5 level. I got to see more. I got to see more out of it for Neil Brown against a more difficult schedule this year. So I'll go. Now, I've also said I think West Virginia probably wins 8 games. So I'm talking here about the difference between one game, UCF and West Virginia. But I will lean West Virginia over, UCF over WVU. If we're talking about who do we have next? Colorado. I mean, I just think they have a way higher floor than Colorado. It just feels way safer. I was, part of this earlier was like, they have a higher ceiling. And I started to think, all right, do I just say they have a higher ceiling than all these teams? And I was like, well, if you really want to talk Colorado, I suppose you can paint me into a corner and say, look, they've got a first-round draft pick at quarterback. They've got a first-round two-way freak at receiver and corner and Travis Hunter. They've got a lot of high-level talent. They've got the best offensive tackle, best prep offensive tackle in the country coming in. They did get some nice finds in the transfer portal that are coming in to shore things up. Maybe it all comes together and chemistry doesn't really matter. That was a part of Deion's press conference the other day that didn't get a lot of talk. He really bristled at a question about chemistry, and he seemed to kind of indicate like it doesn't really matter that much. You guys are making way too much out of this, was sort of his attitude about it. Maybe he is right. They don't need that much chemistry, or it takes really well, and they're able to let those guys, they have health, and they're able to let the first-round draft picks really carry them this year. And it is slightly easier here than it was in the Pac-12 last year, which was pretty brutal of a schedule for them. Maybe that's there, and Colorado does have the Joel Klatt level upside on that. But they have so much lower of a floor. That just it's too risky of a pick for me to do that. And then with TCU, that's another one. If you wanted to debate who has the higher ceiling there, TCU has also recruited very well. There's never really a lack of talent on TCU's roster. This again comes down to, all right, quarterback, head coach, and I will take KJ Jefferson, Gus Malzahn over Sonny Dykes and Josh Hoover. Josh Hoover, I will admit, is kind of that's a place where I'm leveraged pretty high on saying like, you're gonna have to prove it to me. I didn't really see it there. But if he is good, and like the buzz at Big 12 Media Day from TCU sure seemed to be that they feel like Josh Hoover can be a dude. I mean, if he is, TCU is probably a team that we're not talking about enough right now, because there's not a lot of chatter, to me anyway, seemingly, about TCU and their chances there. They've got an opportunity there if Josh Hoover really is a dude. But I will take what I think is the safer bet. It's not perfect. UCF still needs to build more program depth. That probably will take time to get to where they really want to be. But I like what Gus seems to be cooking up there with the Knights. I will also probably be taking them to win at Florida, man. Put the final nail in the Billy Napier coffin. I would love to see that. But a part of the reason I bring this up is because Andy Staples and Ralph Russo, Andy Staples of On3, Ralph Russo from the Associated Press, combined for it's pretty wild to see it out there on social media. Let me see. I lost it. I didn't have this actually pulled up for you. Like what we got is them predicting. I'll just cut right to the chase. I just had a debate about West Virginia and UCF. You got Andy Staples predicting West Virginia and UCF to both make the college football playoff. Here we go. It's all about what history would tell us the 12-team playoff should be here. And here is the bracket that Andy Staples came up with, working through the criteria laid out there by Ralph Russo from the AP, which is all based on the historical data. And you see that he has UCF winning the Big 12, playing into my theory there, saying that they would have the best chance of the unranked teams to be ranked. But West Virginia is probably going to be ranked if they're squeezing in as an 11 seed. Look at that. Alabama, West Virginia, the old Nick Saban Bowl. Alabama and West Virginia there in the college football playoff. But both teams making it in. So with the data, and the data was, hey, here are the top 12 teams in the playoff era that wound up making up the New Year's Six Bowls. And based on that, here's how you need to pick based on what the AP poll says at the beginning of the year. Cross-referencing both polls. AP poll preseason, end of the year college football playoff top 12. This is what he found. you need to choose 4 of the 5 teams ranked number 1 through 5 in the AP poll. So all but one of them will make that playoff. Choose 2 of the 5 teams ranked number 6 through 10. Choose 2 of the 10 teams ranked 11 through 20. Choose 1 of the 5 teams ranked 21 through 25, and choose 3 unranked teams. And so through that process, he got to the point where he was choosing 3 unranked teams, and he went with 2 of those being from the Big 12 in West Virginia and UCF. So, I mean, admittedly, I just kind of laid out a case for West Virginia. I definitely laid out a case for UCF. Like a lot of what is going on there, this is a little too rich for my blood. It's a little too rich for my blood. Even the 2 teams in the playoff part, just in general, is too rich for my blood. I would love for it to happen for the Big 12, but short of having the same scenario play out that we had in 2022, where you have a team going on an unbeaten run, magical run with a Heisman candidate quarterback, and they come up just short in overtime of a Big 12 championship game, it's about the only scenario where I could see the Big 12 really getting 2 teams into the college football playoff. I have no trust at all in the selection committee to give the Big 12 any kind of benefit of the doubt there. And I feel like it's just me being a realist on that front. I hope that I'm wrong. And I got a lot of people saying their Big 12 hot take this year was that the Big 12 would get 2 teams in the playoff. I do think that's very much a hot take. I think there's a better chance that the SEC gets 5 teams in the playoff than there is the Big 12 gets 2, which sucks. But I do feel like we all kind of realize that's the reality, right? It's the unfortunate reality of where we're at with the playoff and just with the sport right now. So anyway, speaking of your hot takes, I'm going to get to some of your hot takes in just a moment to finish off this show. But first, I do want to say hello to Matthew. Appreciate you, Matthew. Thank you for being here. If you want to be like Matthew, get your comment or question on the show today, click the $ below the chat box to do so. Matthew says, just joining after a long while. Well, it's great to see you, Matthew. Thank you for being here. He says, RG3 let go from ESPN. Dude was a good commentator. Hopefully he'll find a similar gig somewhere else. That was a weird one today, right? Yeah, RG3 out of nowhere gets fired. I guess I say out of nowhere. I know everybody was talking about his croissant photo from the other day, but I mean, that can't be why he got fired, right? Like, I don't know. It's got to be something else. I am very puzzled by that. I don't think he was like everybody's cup of tea, because I will give him this. The guy was not afraid to be himself and have some personality. Sometimes it came across a little bit goofy, but I like him. I thought he, overall was pretty likable. And I think it's great for the Big 12 to have a name like RG3 out there working for ESPN, working in the media, doing a bunch of college football games. So I was honestly a little disappointed to see that. I like listening to RG3 for the most part. So hopefully he will, Matthew, maybe with Fox. We'll see. I guess some of it maybe depends on why he was actually let go by ESPN. I do not know. Do not know exactly why that happened. Okay, let's get to your Big 12 hot takes. Your Big 12 hot takes. What's your hottest take for the Big 12 this year? As you can see, there are 140 responses to this, so you have a lot of them. I want to just start reacting to some of these on the fly. Now, here's my guy, Rob. West Virginia fans, you already got to him. I said I thought about quote tweeting him and really throwing him to the West Virginia Wolves for this, but I didn't because I'm a nice guy. But he said West Virginia fails to make a bowl game. Now, that is, to me, definitely a very hot take. Yes, tough schedule. Yes, I laid out that 5-game stretch. Yes, a piece of this, too. I'm sure Rob is considering the fact that they have Penn State at home. They got to go to Pitt, rivalry road game. Not going to be easy. But I definitely think West Virginia is making a bowl. I think they have enough for that. I've seen a lot of KU is going to win the Big 12. KU is going to the college football playoff. If Jalen Daniels stays healthy, that's not really a hot take. Jalen Daniels stays healthy. I think the expectation should be that they would be right there and in contention. So we have another one there. Texas Tech will play in the Big 12 championship game. There is, I think, some precedent for that in that the last couple of years we've had a team in the Big 12 championship game that looked down and out, left for dead in the offseason, or just came out of nowhere a little bit. Last year, obviously, Oklahoma State was left for dead in the offseason, all that speculation about Gundy and NIL, and, the game passed him by, and, conversation in which I was taking part, by the way, because it really did feel like that. He winds up making the Big 12 championship game. Year before that, K-State, they were not one of the favorites to get there. They wind up coming from a 7-5 regular season the year before and making it. A year before that, it was Baylor. Baylor started the season unranked. They wind up winning the Big 12. So if we're following that sort of trajectory, then Texas Tech is right in that same vein. I have a hard time buying into it because of the Baron Morton thing. So I would still say that it's a pretty hot take. We got a lot of this from our friend Digital Dam here. There were a couple of other Oregon State fans that were in here saying Oregon State would finish top 3 alongside Utah and Oklahoma State. I am not going to disparage Oregon State too much because I have so much empathy for the position that they are in right now, and I do not envy it. I disagree with that take, especially after some of the transfer portal hits that they took. And again, some of that, I feel bad for them because you're going to get some of that when you essentially just drop down out of the Power 5 level based on what happened outside of your control. Oregon State fans, I feel for you. I do disagree with that. Last year's Oregon State team, if you put them in this year's Big 12, I'd still probably disagree with that a little bit, but it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting with DJU. As it stands now, though, I can't get down with that. Also, Oregon State lost its head coach. Fair to be pointed out there that's a part of it. Ryan says there will be 2 dominant teams, 2 cellar dwellers, and a whole lot of cannibalism in the middle. Fairly warm. I think the 2 dominant teams thing, I know somebody says in the comments here, people are saying like this is reasonable. There is a good chance that something like that could play out at the top where you have 2 dominant teams and we don't see quite the logjam up top. But man, I think the factor that people may not be taking into account here is the unbalanced schedules. I think that could make it much more of a certainty that we're going to have more than just 2 dominant teams up there at the top that people are really talking about and thinking about, because it just, the unbalanced schedules means somebody could be up at the top just based purely on, or mostly on their schedule, more so on their schedule than somebody else. Somebody else gets the short end of the stick. They run into a much more difficult schedule and they're going to have more losses, and it's going to create more of a logjam to me there than it would be if you had everybody playing everybody, which was the Big 12's calling card at one point in time. Then I could see this being a more surefire bet to actually play out like that. But people seem to think that's pretty reasonable from Ryan. I don't think it's crazy hot or anything like that. I don't think this is hot at all on Willie Fritz. They will win a game no one thinks they can. I'll give them that. I don't think look, Dana Holgorsen damn near beat Texas last year. That was Texas last year, right? Where there was, what was it? Something screwy happened. Something screwy happened in that Texas game that got Texas the win over Houston. So, look, if Dana's getting close to that, then sure as hell, we can get Willie Fritz to cross that line and get a win. West Virginia in the conference championship game. Houston is underrated. That may not be that hot. Okay. I mean, since he starts 4-0 and makes a bowl, Arizona struggles a lot more. I'd say the Arizona part is hot-ish. Yeah, I could see it if you're going to say, hey, Brent Brennan, new year. These are the narratives that I hear about Arizona. Obviously, Brent Brennan, it's a new coach at the Power 4 level. They're changing conferences. That's a lot of change going on. And then the other one really is just, well, John Wilner kind of dropped the other day, if you watch the videos of him on the channel, like, new year. Every year is a new year. You can't really count on just having the same sort of chemistry. Also, they haven't been used to being the hunted, and this year they will definitely be the hunted. Last year, they got to sneak up on everybody, especially because the guy that played quarterback for them all year is not the guy that started the year playing quarterback. Like Fafita really jumped out of nowhere. So I was going to go look at Cincinnati here to look at the first 4 games of the schedule. Towson, I mean, they should be fine there. Pitt, that's definitely winnable. At Miami of Ohio. Boy, what are they doing scheduling a road game there? I guess that makes it a little more difficult, but definitely winnable. And then they've got Houston. Then they'll go to Tech, to UCF, Arizona State at home, at Colorado, West Virginia, at Iowa State, K-State, TCU. I mean, I could see it. That's warm. That's warm. I wouldn't pick Cincinnati to go bowling, but I could see it because the schedule seems to set up for them to have the opportunity to really do that. They would probably need to start 4-0 in order for that to happen. I guess I would say that. Let me get to just a couple more, and we will get out on that. So if you have anything, I know that I have a super chat to catch up on. I promise I will get to that. But if you have anything, make sure you get it in now. Click the $ below the chat box to submit a super chat. It is definitely buzzer beater time there. Well, I mean, this is not a hot take at all. Despite Colorado losing to Nebraska and having a mid-season, they will be the most talked about team. They very, very much could be, obviously, because of the star power there. And, I mean, look, if Prime keeps having press conferences like he did, that's going to draw a lot of attention. Here's this. DeQuan Finn of Baylor will be first-team All-Big 12 QB. When I tell you guys what's your hottest Big 12 take of the season or for the upcoming season, this is what I'm looking for. This is awesome because it's unique, it's fun, and it definitely qualifies as a hot take. There are a lot of good quarterbacks in this conference. Shedeur Sanders, probably the highest NFL upside there. Jalen Daniels, September 2022, he's being mentioned as a Heisman candidate. And when he is healthy, he's definitely flashed a lot of brilliance out there. Avery Johnson, generational talent at K-State, needs to go out and actually prove it. Cam Rising, 7th-year senior, has been around the game. He's played in Rose Bowls. He's won Pac-12 championships. Like, you know, all about him there. Like, there's some good, established, and just young, very talented quarterbacks in this league. DeQuan Finn usurping all of them to be first-team All-Big 12 QB would be a hot take, but it's a fun one. I'd kind of like to take a peek at what that world looks like. By the way, like, I don't mean to slight anybody on the quarterbacks. Garrett Green, great QB. Trying to think who else is going to be mad at me. KJ Jefferson, great QB. If DeQuan Finn comes in and is better than all of those, it'd be fascinating. That would be fascinating for the Big 12 season. Terrific player in the MAC, exactly what Baylor needed. They needed a spark at quarterback. They needed to just hit the reset button, I think, on that position, and it was the perfect way to do it. I am high on DeQuan Finn. If he's going to be the first team All Big 12 QB, though, right? Like, Baylor's probably got to have a really nice season. And I don't know that he alone is going to be enough to really make that happen. Let's end on this. This is a fun one. Iowa State is going to walk into Rice-Eccles Stadium and show Utah who daddy is. All right, let's go. I saw this earlier and I went and looked at the game. This forced me to go do a little bit more of a dive. I'm like, okay, first of all, when is this game? Well, it's the week of Thanksgiving. It is November 23rd. November 23rd, we get that game. They're going to Utah. Iowa State will then close with K-State. 3 of their last 4. Cyclones have a hell of a finish to the year. They're at Kansas, then they have Cincinnati at home, then they're at Utah, and then they go to K-State. That Kansas game, there's an at there. It is technically on the road, but that's at Arrowhead, so that will be, I'm sure, like a pseudo neutral site game for Iowa State. That's a really fun end to the year. I don't know that anybody's going to walk into Rice-Eccles and, like, quote-unquote, show Utah who daddy is. They're like, what was the stat? And I'm going to have to go look up my own stat. It's in the Open for Business newsletter, by the way, ofbnews.com. If you want to subscribe to that, if you're a Big 12 fan, I would much appreciate it if you did. But I literally addressed this, and I had the stat in there about what Utah is at home over the last, 5 years. Gosh. 30-2. Utah is 30-2 at home over the last 5 years. So, yeah, I would say that qualifies as a pretty scorching hot take if you say Iowa State's going to walk in there. The only way that happens is if Iowa State's healthy at QB and Utah is not. That's the only way that happens. So that's pretty good. You know, Johnny, I will say this about Johnny, much like I just gave a lot of credit to the DeQuan Finn take there. Johnny Jones with Iowa State giving me a specific game and having it be one that is definitely a hot take and is interesting and fun. I like that, Johnny. I like that. Thank you for that one. Okay. Before I get out of here, let's say hello to Matthew Hazelhorst. Matthew, what's up? Sometime this football season, we'll have to watch a game at a sports bar. I'm out here in OVP. All right, Overland Park. Yep, that is. I'm an OP as well. I'm an OP guy. Yeah, hit me up on Twitter sometime, man. I will say I'm credentialed this year for the K-State home games at least, and I know I'll be going to the BYU game as well. So it may be a little tricky for a weekend when I'm there, but hit me up on Twitter at @JOKurtz. We'll see what we can do there. Definitely appreciate your support of the channel and appreciate you being here, my friend. And same to everybody. Getting up to almost 1,000 here by the end. A lot of people from good old Twitter hanging out here tonight. I appreciate all of you guys. We hit an important deadline on the Clemson Florida State thing. Unfortunately, nothing sexy, nothing exciting for now. We'll see. We'll see how long this goes on before we get some sort of news on that front. But thank you all for being here. If you are a Big 12 fan, again, get subscribed to the Open for Business newsletter, ofbnews.com. To do that, if you're a fan of what I do, if you want to support what I'm doing here, that is the best way to do it right now. I really appreciate it. It looks like we are having quite the chat in there with arguing over spellings. So, look, I hope everything was okay there. Let me know if we need to get moderators going again on all of that. But hope you guys enjoyed it tonight. Tell your friends, tell your family, spread the word on social media, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, Facebook, wherever you're at. Let people know about the show. Let people know about the newsletter. And let's continue to grow this thing bigger and bigger. Appreciate all of you guys. Love you and take care. I will talk to you soon.